Yeah.
What's this, man?
Let's open this meeting with a moment of silence, followed by the serenity prayer, and I guess we need a whisper. Again. God. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to. Okay, I want to thank the committee for letting me do this for the third time. Thank you. Y'all probably won't like it, but because I pick my own questions. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to get the speakers, the people on the panel, to speak on each question, up to about 5 minutes on each question, and they don't know what questions they are, so it's going to be anonymous. And what we're going to do is we're going to start at one spot or another, and then we'll go back and forth, and each one gets to talk about each question. And let's see, anything else I need to? That's good. That's good.
Can we translate that? Can we translate?
Oh, we got a smart ass. Got a smart ass. He must be from Rhode Island. Yeah. You're getting the first question. All right. Okay, so the first question is, tell us about a surrender you have had after getting sober.
Right now, Kevin O'Neill, alcoholic. There are so many, and none of them felt good. So many of you know this story, or some parts of this story, because you lived through it with me, but I lost my mom in December of 2020, which is not necessarily a sad and tragic thing, but it could have been. See, my mom was 88 years old, and she lived a very full life, but she was the woman that would stand on the doorstep when I would either be coming or going, shaking her head quizzically with a tear in her eye, just not certain what she could do for me or what she was supposed to do for me, because I was just so out of reach for her. And she would say, I'm praying for you, because that was all she could do towards the end of my drinking. And she witnessed so many things. My parents split up the day before my freshman year of high school was to start. And that 4 years, my younger brother and I with my mom, was a very tough time. It was a very tough time for her, because she had devoted 25 years of her life to this marriage and had no identity outside of it. And she'd cry herself to sleep every night. And I was as much of an asshole as a 14-year-old soon-to-be alcoholic could be. I had no patience for this. I could not handle her pain. I had no place to put my own. And I would yell at her, and I would demean her, and that's when my drinking started. And for 24 years, I treated her like she was a utility. She was something that I needed when I needed it, but I didn't pay attention to it. You don't pay attention to the electric company unless you need electricity, right? But I would show up when I needed something, and she was always available. But finally, she'd run out. And then I got sober, and I turned 40 a year and a month or so after I got sober. And none of my family came to my birthday party that my wife threw. My mother didn't believe that this sobriety thing was going to take, and it hurt, because I wanted things to happen faster. And my sponsor told me, just give it time. Show up. Be the man that that you know you're supposed to be. And if things are supposed to heal, they'll heal. And I didn't believe him, but I did it. And it happened. My mom got sick in October of 20. And it was right before her 88th birthday. We had no unfinished business. She asked me 3 questions, though. I asked her what she wanted out of the next whatever period of time that she had remaining, and she said, I want to die in my own bed, which was difficult because of COVID. People were dying behind locked doors and in sick wards and without their loved ones. I want to be surrounded by people I love, and I want to make it to Christmas. And this was October, and I said, Mom, I've got 1 and 2. 3 is on you. And we threw a birthday party for her, but she didn't want a big deal made out, and we got lobsters, and she wore lobster hats, and I took pictures of her with a Christmas hat on, and just knowing that the end was on its way. We made a big deal of her. And on December 28th of 2020, on a day that Bombo called me as I was walking into the house, knowing it was going to be the last time I was with her, I want to tell you, you saved me. You changed my point of view that day in that 2-minute phone call, so please keep calling me. Thank you. I went in and I held this mother that held me and prayed for me and watched her take her light into the next room. It was December 28th. It was after Christmas. She was in her own bed. She was surrounded by people that she loved, two of my brothers and me. And while that was painful, it was an experience that I would not pass up, and I would have not had were it not for you men and what you taught me. So what's the surrender in that? I had to surrender to the idea that what I thought was bad would be bad, or what I thought would be good was good. Because this experience was kind of the seminal experience of this period of my life. Showing up for somebody in a really profound way, operating outside of my instincts, which are to bring chaos, to listen to you and to try and bring peace and comfort to someone who had brought peace and comfort to me for so many years. I mean, you can't make this up. I mean, this is not who I am. This is not, I don't surrender, but I can be surrendered. And the most amazing experience, I've always been afraid in this way, this little way of death. I've always had this fear. I wouldn't tell you that, but it's animated me throughout my life. I lost all of that fear that day, all of it. Because as she released, I could feel her going someplace where she was supposed to be because her work here was done. But she left love. And that day, I became another version of the man I'm supposed to be. There's something else I was going to say that was profound, but I think I'm over my time. But that's my excuse because I don't remember what it was. But thank you, AA. I cannot imagine what kind of person I would have been were I the non-sober guy in that experience, having that experience. You've helped me do hard things. And if that's not a surrender for a guy like me, I'm not sure what is. Ben?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jack. I'm an alcoholic. A surrender since I've been sober. There's been many. But I also want to say that surrender, there's a big difference between surrendering something and deciding I'm going to go with the flow. I'm going to do these things. The surrender that I think that are meaningful to me are the ones where I am surrendered, where it's just, there's no chance that I'm getting out of this. I was probably 6 years sober, and I got a phone call in the morning, and for a family, a mother and a father and 2 children died in a house that I built. And it was a problem with one of the pieces of equipment that we had installed, and we had finished it 3 years earlier. And I got the phone call, and I got in that truck, and I'm terrified about what's happened. I'm just stunned by what's happened. And my buddy Tim got in the truck with me, and we went up, and I talked to the sheriff's department, and it was a long ordeal, and my sponsor was on the phone that day. I talked to Bob shortly after that. I talked to my grand sponsor at the time, a guy by the name of Jerry Jones, and Jerry told me something on the way up there. He said, "Jack, there can't be any accidents in the legal system." He said, "It's going to get ugly." He said, it's going to be long. And he said, what you need to do is take this thing and put it in a box. And don't touch the box unless somebody asks you something specifically about it, and give the box to God. And that's really hard to do when all I'm thinking is I'm going to lose my business. I was facing a criminal grand jury indictment, and it was ugly. And I thought I was going to lose my house. I thought I was going to lose my business. I thought I was going to lose my reputation. I'm from a small town in Colorado. And and I had to do what Jerry said. I had to give it to God. And I am not the type of guy that will give something like that has every aspect of my life wrapped up in it to God without trying to wrest satisfaction and happiness by managing that situation a little better. I'm not that guy. And at that line in the book, it doesn't just say we do that. It says we fall victim to the delusion that I need to do that. And if you've fallen victim to the delusion that you need to do something, trying to fix that yourself, it's not possible. You can't do it. And through the road dogs that I have, the friends in Alcoholics Anonymous, good sponsorship and all those things, I had to surrender to that process, and I had no control over the process, and I had no control over the outcome. And it went on for 5 years. And there's a lot of men in this room that helped me walk through that. And I can tell you that if you flew a drone over me during that time, most of the time, you would have no idea that was going on. And that's a direct result of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's being surrendered to a point where I'll follow these directions, I'll practice these principles, because I had no choice. There was no option whatsoever. And I can tell you that year 5 of that, my daughter had gotten married. And she wanted to have a family. And she came to me and her mother, and we were talking, and she couldn't get pregnant. There's a lot of reasons why, medical reasons why she couldn't get pregnant. She tried fertility treatment. She tried everything. And she got pregnant. And all of a sudden, it felt like there was a God again. I couldn't see it in my own life. And 2 months after she got pregnant, she lost the baby. And she came to our house. She came to her mom and dad. And she was angry with God. And I could have climbed right in there because I had a lot of reasons to be angry with God. And I didn't. I sat there and I told her, I do. She asked me, why would God do this? And I said, I don't think God's doing it. And she said, well, what do I do? And I said, I don't know. I think you'd just be sad. And I just cried with my daughter. We sat there for I don't know how long and just cried. And I knew while we were crying that there was absolutely a God. I knew it with all my heart. And I don't know if it was a year later, or a year and a half later, she came back and she said she was pregnant again. And all this stuff in the background with my life and my job and my money and all the stuff's going on in the background. She came to me a year later and she was pregnant again. And we were all thrilled. Of course there's a God. Day like that? Absolutely. And 4 or 5 months later, she lost that baby. And it was the same thing. And I'm going through this stuff, and she's going through her stuff. And the cool thing is Alcoholics Anonymous allowed me to show up for both things. The principles of this program allowed me to show up and be the man God wanted me to be in both situations. And I can tell you that we sat and cried again. I didn't try to give her answers because I didn't have any. And I still knew there was a God. And I walked through all that stuff with the business, and a lot of guys know what I do today. But I can tell you, I did lose that business. I didn't lose the house. And I was just fine. In fact, it seemed like everything was going exactly perfectly at the time after it ended. And I took a job with the city of Aspen. And I became, and when it was going on, I thought I'd never work in town again, you know? And in the city of Aspen, I became a trusted confidant to the mayor of Aspen. One day he came to me and he asked me a question about an agenda item on the city council meeting beforehand. And I said to him, you know, Steve, sometimes the good can get in the way of the best. And I was quoting traditions to him. And that night in the meeting, he quoted it, and it was in the paper the next day. But I went from that guy thinking my life is over to sitting in the mayor's office, to being a father for my daughter. During all of it, during that 5-year period when all that stuff was going on. And I can tell you today that my reputation is just fine in that town. And I do what I love to do, and I have 2 grandchildren. My daughter had two beautiful children, and they're the love of my life. And I couldn't have walked through it without having been surrendered. And when I'm surrendered, the best thing for a guy like me to do is turn to the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thanks.
Steve Lamb, alcoholic. It's good to be here. It's good to be sober, and it's always an honor and a privilege to share in Alcoholics Anonymous, particularly among the men that I love. And thank you, Ben, for the light topic. I appreciate you starting out on that. Surrender. I've had several surrenders. None of them have been volitional. Probably the most recent one that I think that was significant was a little less than 2 years ago. I had a stroke, and I had to go through therapy. I had to learn how to talk again. I had to go through vision therapy. I still have a lot of peripheral vision issues. I mean, I got lost in my own backyard, and it's a small backyard, you know, and it's and I had to learn how to talk again. I couldn't say the word water, and I was self-centered, and I was self-conscious about it. And my home group is a hybrid meeting, so I normally go live, but when the stroke happened, I started just going on Zoom. Because I bump into stuff, it's awkward, I don't want to be embarrassed, I don't want to run into stuff. The way my home group is set up, the meetings are pretty tight, it's all kind of asses to elbows, and so I'm not going live, I'm going on Zoom. And my sponsees are telling me, you got to go to the meeting. I'm not going. I'll maybe next week, right? And then the way it works in my home group is if you're going to give a cake, you got to be there. And I had a sponsee that was going to show up, and he was going to take a cake, so I got to be there, right? So I talked to my buddy Bill, and he says he's really thrilled. He'd be happy to drive me. And I get in the car, and we get to the meeting hall. The first thing he does is announce very loudly that the newcomer's in the in the car with him. That's me. So thank you, Bill. And then he tells me, okay, we got to do our job, because he is the chairman of our group. I am the assistant chairman, which means we set up the chairs. And we set up the chairs. And like I said, they're pretty tight, and I'm kind of concerned. I'm looking around, and because the way it's set up is there's a podium, and you got to negotiate around the chairs. You got to not bump into the chairs. You got to avoid the podium. And then now they have a camera that's mounted on the ceiling, but it used to be on a tripod. So there's a lot of things that I can bump into, and I'm nervous about it. They call on this guy because he's going to take a cake, and I gotta negotiate around the podium. I gotta not bump into the chairs to give this gentleman a cake, and I'm kind of concerned. And I stand up, and first thing I notice is my sponsor gets up and he grabs me by the shoulder, and he kind of turns me around the corner so that I don't bump into the chairs. And a guy that I sponsor grabs me by the shoulder, and they hand me hand to shoulder down the aisle so that I don't trip, that I don't stumble. And we talk a lot about love and service, and I had learned how to be of service. But accepting service was difficult for me. You know, I got this. I don't have it, man. I don't have it. I can't even, I'm bumping into stuff. It's just, and I had to surrender the reality of my impairments. And you guys were there. And you didn't talk about love and service. You didn't warn me about love and service. You grabbed me hand to shoulder, hand and shoulder, hand to shoulder, and you demonstrated love and service to me. And I was able to accept that and surrender to that because I didn't have a choice, you know? And I thought that this was going to be awful, and it was a beautiful, wonderful thing. And you know, and now I can more readily accept. I have guys that they want to give me a ride. They'll tell me things like, you know, when I had the stroke, I was complaining that there's a kind of an annual fundraiser that they have. It's a chili cook-off. And I would refer to it as the cookie chill-off. I mean, everything was backwards. And I'm telling these sponsees, I said, I can't do this. And they're like, oh no, this will be great. This will be great. This will be hilarious. Number one, he goes, and by the way, the newcomers, they won't know the difference. They won't know what's going on, right? And they want to take me, you know, they want to be of service. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's surrender. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks, Steve. I love that story. Hi, folks. I'm Tommy T. I'm an alcoholic. Pleasure to be back at Suspects. That's fine. We're used to it. I'm just grateful to be back here, and I can't even see it.
That's a picture of me getting shot. That ain't right.
That's okay. Oh, that is your picture of being shot.
Yeah, well, that's the bullet.
That's nice. Is it still there?
Yeah, it's still there.
It's still there. It's still there. The
I
gift
love
that
you
keeps giving. So as far as surrenders go, it would be easy to talk about 7 to 10 years in Alcoholics Anonymous and burning the life to the ground, but there's been so many, and I don't go out easy. It usually really has to be in some pain. There usually has to be some tears. There has to be some people hurt, and I'm never proud of that stuff. But it's just my journey, but one that was about, I don't know, a year and a half or two. Kevin could probably help me on the timing of it, because the day that I had the bottom, Kevin asked me to speak on a Zoom meeting, and it was a mess, but, my son, Brett, those of you that know my story, I tend to run away from responsibility and children and things like that, and I did that with this boy until he was 9 years old, and then got sober, went back to court and got some visitation rights, and he lived with me at 12, and then he went down the path that we go down here, and I was scared, stiff as a parent, and did a lot of wrong things. And the joke in my house is that he got more than just good looks from me. He was in rough shape. I was always worried about him. And now he's kind of turned it around, and he's going to be celebrating 10 years sober not too long from now, a couple weeks. But he's never done things that I expect him to do. He's never been the go-getter that I want him to be, you know, all these things. And I don't know I have all these things in me, but a little thing happened at the house where I was trying to get in touch with him. He's out on his own and things. He's 38 years old. He's not a child at this point. And I couldn't reach him, and so my head has taken me back that because he hasn't been back to an AA meeting since COVID, and that is another expectation I had of him. But I didn't know these were going on, and he gets a $900 check at the house. So I text him and say, hey, you got a $900 check here. You want to stop by? I'd love to see you. Ghosted. During that time, my daughter is getting rid of a boyfriend, a live-in boyfriend, and he's refusing to leave. So my wife says, will you talk to this guy? He wants to talk to you. I said, I'm home from work sick. I'm like, yeah, bring him over, whatever. So I'm talking to this kid on the couch, and in comes my son. And what I really wanted to say was, son, I miss you. Is everything okay? What came out of my mouth was, where the F you been, man? I've been texting you like crazy. And he just quietly said, I'm a grown-ass man, Dad. I'm busy. Where's my check? Now, the guys that know me here, I have never raised my voice in this marriage with these children in my home in the last 14 years. It's kind of a spiritual pride thing. Well, we broke the record that day because I just put my hand in this kid Mark's face and said, this is going to have to wait a second. I need to deal with this. And I beeline after this kid into the kitchen, and I said, what the F is your problem? What's going on? He says, what? What do you mean? He says, I'm a grown-ass man. I'm here to get my check. Where is it? And I said, you better back up. He said, I'm right here, Pop. And he's in my face. He's like 6'3", 38 in the gym 4 or 5 days a week. He's a trained Muay Thai fighter. I had a moment of clarity. And I said, this isn't going to go well, and I'm not, you know, proud to say this, but the best I could get out is you better back up or I'll put a steak knife in your chest. He grabbed his check. He left the house, slammed the door. I went in, I was shaking a little bit, and I was sitting on the couch, and Mark's like just scared like to death, this poor kid, you know? And Cheryl walks out and said, who was that? I said, I'm sorry you had to see that, but that's the guy you married. Because that used to happen all the time. And I was just crushed by it. And it happened to be a Tuesday, and I got to call my sponsor, Harold, at 5:30. This happened at like 4. I call Harold, 27 years sober, you know, working with a bunch of guys, GSR at the home group, the whole thing. I'm like, you don't know what happened, Harold? And he's like, wow, well, let's unpack that a little bit. And he says, you know, let's do some inventory on it. So I come out with Mr. AA. Well, should that be in a 4th step type of format, or should we do 11th step? And he's like, we're on Zoom, so I can see what he's doing. He's going, Tom, do you pray on your knees? And I said, no, never. I'm just not that guy. And he says, are you willing to? I said, right now I'm willing to do anything. Give me directions, I'll take it. He says, I want you to pray on your knees. No set prayers, nothing you learned in AA. Just ask God to show you all these expectations you have for this boy, and let it come from your heart. I said, I will do it. And he said, give me a call back later. So I hit my knees, and I asked God, please, God, I'm afraid of the man that I saw today. Let me see some truths here. Show me the expectations I have for my boy. And I put pen to paper, and 7 things came down. And I don't remember all 7 right now. I do have them. I saved them. But there was one that hit me hard. And it said, I expect my son to be a better AA member and attend meetings because I don't want to lose him. But then as I was writing it, I said, that's not the truth. And I kept writing. I want Brett to be the AA guy I am so he can do the work on me for not being there for him like I did on my father and get past it and love me. And I just said, wow, where the hell did this come from? You know, it was crazy. And then Kevin calls and says, I need you to speak at this meeting tonight. I said, no, I can't. He said, no, you absolutely have to because this is what it's about. And I went on, and I just couldn't stop crying. And I remember, Kevin, there was a new guy at the meeting, and a couple of guys that are here today were on this meeting, and he's in that lower right corner. And I probably apologized to this kid three times. This is not what 27 years of sobriety looks like. You know, I was losing it. But when I called Harold back, it was good. It was good. And I don't have those expectations for my boy anymore. And we texted each other that day. He said, I felt like I was in a sober blackout, Dad. I don't know where that came from. I said, let's get together and have a meal. And we went out, and he's my best friend today. He said to me, he said, Dad, I worry about you because I think you're getting taken advantage of in your new situation with Cheryl and the kids. And I said, well, I appreciate that concern, son. That really touches my heart. But what you don't understand is my past is making things right for all the things I did wrong. So don't worry about me. We got to a different level that day that I don't think I would have ever done unless I acted like a total asshole, you know, and do it. But I've had a bunch of those over the last few years, maybe not as dramatic as that one, but they continually happen now. Something's going on in my sobriety now that I don't know what's going on, but, you know, books I've read 4 or 5 times before now, I'm crying when I'm reading them. Things are just happening. Stuff's opening up to me. I'm seeing things differently. I don't know. I was a little concerned about it. Everybody says maybe you're finally growing up a little bit in AA. I don't know. But I'm just going to ride it and keep going with it because it's better than anything I got planned. That's for sure. So thanks.
Okay, so whenever I was going to do these questions, I told a couple people about one of the questions, and so whoever it was put it in the ask it basket. Yeah, I was like, they snuck it in on them when I was going to give it to them, but I'm going to do it anyway. So anyway, the question is, that wasn't funny. No. The question is, I want to know, tell us about your Ebby, and it could be your Ebby at the beginning of sobriety. It could be your Ebby, your last person that's been very powerful in your sobriety. And start with you, Tommy.
Okay. Well, I was not 12-stepped. I came in with some, you know, like a police escort and a lot of help from the courts and intensive outpatient program and treatment against street crime where, you know, if they beeped you, you had to go give a urine sample within an hour or else you were violated and all that stuff. And I fought AA for a good 6-7 months. I don't think I went to a meeting when I was first abstinent. I had program stuff every night of the week and on the weekends. But when I did come to AA, everybody started to tell me, you know, you got to get a sponsor, you got to get a sponsor, you got to get a sponsor. And I didn't want to get a sponsor. I did not want to stay in AA. I wanted to put some Band-Aids on and get off of the court trouble I was in. And I was going to look for a 6-step program to control drinking without consequence. You know, I would have been all in for that. But there was a guy, John, and he had worked in the Department of Ed. He was a shop mechanic, and I knew him. I knew he drank like an animal. And John had the best listening, and just, he gave you what he had. He was about 5 years sober, 6 years sober at that point. And he said, you know, I don't know if I could be your sponsor, but you call me anytime. And I called him a lot. And he would say, meet me at a meeting. And when I didn't have my car, he would come pick me up for a meeting. And he introduced me to AA, and I was very distant of everybody. I didn't want to go to any of them. But I saw how he just loved it. He would go to 2 to 3 meetings on a Saturday, 2 to 3 meetings on a Sunday, and you know, he would tell me some things, but he wouldn't. You could tell there was something, you know, he was holding back and all, but he was just a great listener. And he would talk about like how great things had happened in his sobriety, and I got to get a glimpse of God. I always say, I didn't find God in AA. I found God in the diner with men from AA. You know, listening to these old guys that were just listening to my newcomer nonsense and all the problems I created in my own life. But he gave me the most powerful lesson that I've ever seen, because I went on to a guy, George, that took me through these 12 steps not too long after that. And he could be another Rebbe, but But John had some stuff inside of him, and he touched on some of it with me, but they were just demons that all of us, or a lot of us, come in with these type of demons that was just eating away at him and not drinking and going to meetings. John put a 32 snub in his mouth with 7 years of sobriety and blew his head off, and he was a great guy. And that scared the living stuff out of me. Like, this was a guy I was looking up to, and that was his best answer. So when George came along and introduced this book to me, I mean, I just, threw myself into it. But I'll never forget John, because he was just a great guy, and he gave me everything he had. So, thanks.
Steve Lamb, alcoholic. I'm thinking about Gary M. You probably remember Gary, Bill. He was, when I first got sober, I had no interest in working the steps or getting a sponsor. I didn't want to overreact. I just wanted to not drink and get better. And Gary was a guy that would show up, and he was always telling me, you got to get a sponsor. And he would say, you need to go to HBMS. You need to go to this Hermosa Beach Men's Stag. And I went to it, and I didn't like it. He goes, why don't you like it? I go, man, all the guy talks about, all they talk about is the steps, the traditions, and sponsorship. And Gary said, okay, so they're talking about all the stuff you're not doing. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you look at it that way. I mean, and I finally got a sponsor, and I started working the steps. And Gary eventually drank, and he went to prison. He's sober now. He didn't shoot himself. He eventually got sober, and I think he's still sober. But he was a guy that, and it befuddled me. And I was talking to my sponsor Michael about it, and he said, well, Gary's a messenger. And he's got all the talk, but you're not just talking about it, you're doing it. And if you do it, you'll stay doing it. And that's been my experience, because this guy knew the book forward and backward, and I mean, he was very proficient in that. But he wasn't doing it, and but he guided me through the way. He really did. He was very helpful.
I'm good. I'm good.
Come on, Ben, on the job.
Jack, alcoholic. It's funny because when that question was answered, I leaned over to Ben, who was sitting next to me, and said, that's a good question. I don't even have to think twice about the answer to the question. I was sitting in a meeting. I was probably 8 months sober, so I was already sober. That was a difference between Bill and I. But I was sitting in a meeting, and it was a blizzard outside, and I can remember where I was sitting in the room. I remember everything about the night, and it was blowing sideways, and we were in a rectory behind the church because the boilers were out in the church, and I'm sitting there, and the meeting's going on, and it's about 8:10, and the meeting started at 8, and the door blows open, and these two people walk into the church, and they're overjeweled and underdressed for Carbondale, Colorado, and I'm on fire with this thing, and I'm thinking she's bringing him to a meeting because I've never seen him before. I didn't know who they were, and it's a small town. And I look around the room trying to figure out who I got to beat to this guy, because I'm thinking he's the new guy and I want to get to him first. And the meeting gets over, and I'm watching the clock, and I got a book in my hand. 9 o'clock hits, and I'm over there just right on him. And I said, hey, I'm Jack. You new here, and do you have a book? And it took me about 5 minutes to understand the terms of the relationship, and he became my sponsor. He was in town from Texas, and he was probably about 30 years sober at the time. And those men and women, I can tell you, alcoholism is like CO poisoning. It comes into your house, and it comes in through the windows, and it comes in through the cracks under the doors, and nobody can see it. And everybody's getting sick and sicker, and nobody knows why. And that's what alcoholism is like. It's like this silent, deadly thing in a house. And that was Don and Karen Maloney, and he would not care at all that I use his name in an AA meeting. A lot of people here knew him, and they swept my wife and I up at a time where we were sick with alcoholism. And you know, I hear in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous all the time that you can't carry the alcoholic. It's not my experience. Those men and women carried us. They breathed life into us when we couldn't take another breath. And they showed us what it looked like to have these principles in their lives. They showed us what it looked like to have a marriage with these principles. They showed us what it looked like to raise kids with these principles. They showed us what it looked like to go to work with these principles. They showed us how to carry them around in our shoes at a time where we were ripe for it because we were dying of this thing. It was one of the most incredible things that ever happened to me. And we're sitting we went to a conference down in Texas with them, which was remarkable all by itself, but we're sitting in the parking lot of the conference on Sunday afternoon. And I said to Don, I said, "Where are we going?" He said, "We're going to a meeting." I'm like, "Don, we've been in meetings since Thursday." And he said, "We're going to a meeting." And they took us to our first home meeting. And we're sitting in Jerry's house, and Steph's on the couch behind me. And she's crying, just bawling, making me look bad. And Billy said to Steph, she said to Steph, "What's wrong?" And Steph said to her, "Why are you guys doing this for us?" And what Billy said to Steph was, I remember it word for word. She said, "We're doing it for you because someone did it for us. And one day you're going to do it for someone else." You know, and we all have our Ebbies. I don't know why it was that guy, but I followed him. You know, one of my absolute worst character defects turned into one of my greatest assets, and that's my stalking skills. And I can tell you, we laugh about that, but I followed that guy everywhere. He would say, "I'm going here, I'm going there, I'm doing this, I'm doing that," and I would follow him. I'm in this room tonight because of him. I am here because of him. You know, his wife Karen still sponsors my daughter, and her life is completely changed, transformed, because she showed her what it looks like to have these things in her family. You know, if they're alive in our family, they're going to go outside with us. What I do at home, I do everywhere else too. And they showed me what it looked like. You know, that's how I met Bob. You know, and all I can say is be someone's Ebby. That's what we do here. It is all we do. This isn't about me getting anything. It's about us waking up spiritually and carrying the message to someone else.
Thanks, Jack. I like the fourth position more than the first position. A lot more. It's funny, I got sober January of 2004, and I had never actually heard of Alcoholics Anonymous before that. And nobody had ever threatened me with it or encouraged me to go. I literally walked into AA, or stumbled down the steps, the 12 steps, literally down 12 steps into their church basement, into AA, having no exposure to it whatsoever, just being desperate, and felt like it was the only place I was directed to by some people I met in an online group on AOL at the time, America Online, which is just the goofiest thing. But I joined my first home group in Kingston, Rhode Island, about a mile from where Roland Hazard is buried, called the Friday Night Big Book. And it was a group that actually welcomed my non-alcoholic wife and my young children into the meeting. It was an open meeting. And my children played in the playroom, and everybody was kind to them. And they welcomed them as much as they welcomed me. And there was a woman who was particularly kind, who was my Ebby and continues to be my Ebby, even though I have not talked to her in a while. Many of you in the room know her because she moved to Nashville. But her name is Mary Jane Roy. She's a past trustee. Got sober in 1968. Became my service sponsor. But in one of my first meetings, I was probably 2 or 3 weeks sober, my first meetings of that weekly home group. She approached me at the end of the meeting with 2 pieces of paper in her hand. And she said something to the effect of, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I'm giving this to you, but I feel called to do so. And one was a large piece of paper that had the poem, I Stand by the Door, or At the Door, I forget, I always mix up whether it's by or at, but either way, Sam Shoemaker's poem. And she said, to her, this is Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you want to be a member of AA, know this and live this way. And the second was a slip of paper with the name and a phone number. It was Bob B. and a 612 area code, and she said, I don't know why, but I just feel like he has a place in your life, or he has a role to play in your life. Now, I live, living 1,200 miles away from St. Paul. This woman reached out to me, as unlovable a guy as I can imagine, or maybe even you can imagine, and she opened up and kind of took a risk, and she actually introduced me to, without question, the 3 most important people in my recovery. My sponsor, Bob, my former sponsor, Scott Lee, and Steve Lee. I don't know how she did that. Well, yeah, I do. She's a woman that allowed the power to work through her. She realized that she was not the source of any of this light, but her job was to reflect it to the best of her ability on every day. And that's what she did. She reflected this light. And she encouraged me, to come here to this retreat. My first Usual Suspects was 19 years ago. This woman, as I said, was a past trustee. And I told somebody this story earlier today, but it's a story I love about her because it really reflects the humility that I think, well, I'm so lacking, but I aspire to have, and I'm not even close. She was wrapping up her service as a trustee, and they're all together, I think, at their final meeting, and everybody's talking about what's next. And someone asked Mary Jane, so Mary Jane, what are you going to do next? And without a question, without a hesitation, she said, I'm going to go back to my home group and be the coffee maker. And that just tells the story of who she was, but she passed this on so freely and so willingly. And if you're here in the Nashville area, I know she doesn't get out very much. Do yourself a favor. Find a way to be in a room with her while she's here. Because to me, she reflects all the best qualities that this program and this fellowship have. And every time I talk to her, and I have not talked to her in a while because she's gotten a little reclusive lately, I say one simple thing, and that is thank you for my life.
Okay, the next question. All right, so it's going to be example of the dark past becoming the greatest possession you have. Tell us about something that you've went through in recovery and how it's helped somebody else. And we will start with Tommy. Tommy.
Oh, all right. My name's Tommy again. I'm an alcoholic. I could just tell you where I find a spot for usefulness here with the young men that seem to approach me. Being married 3 times, very, very unsuccessfully the first 2. Being a deadbeat dad when I got here. Still a little wince when I have to say it, but I do have to say it. Somebody mentioned it before, Scott, I think. You know, they were terminated pregnancies where I would pay for it, but I wouldn't even be man enough to show up for the girl, and that happened more than once. I have an adopted a son I put up for adoption when I was 17 and my girlfriend was 16, and I've never met that boy. His name is Matthew. He's 48 years old now. But if you guys were to come to my home right now and see my 4 children, because they all call me dad, 3 of them you guys would call stepchildren, I call them bonus kids. My son Brett, like I said, we're best friends. But I got the best wife that's out there. She's crazy as they come, crazy as they come. And I like crazy. I'm attracted to crazy. But she is my best friend. And through my mistakes and through great sponsorship, I was blessed with a sponsor for 24 years that made it to Usual Suspects before he passed, and I'm totally grateful for that. I was just looking at a picture of me and him, and actually Bob down here a few years back, and having to do some work, having to take some lumps. But you see, we have that open AA house on Staten Island, and we got the guys over for what we call Big Book and Bagels every one Sunday a month in the warm months, and we're out on the deck, and they see how my wife wants to support me in that, and they see us out in all the AA activities together. We do blend our program a little. We have the same home group. I know that was one of the earlier questions. We take that little line where we can share our prayer and meditation and things with our wives. We pray and meditate together. And when we miss, we have a better day when we pray and meditate together. I could just tell you that. And we're in this together, and I'm just watching her grow. She's 18 years sober, and just watching her grab all these ladies now, and it just lights me up seeing them. I don't always want them in my house. It's a 1,600 square foot house. We got grandkids, a grown son and his wife, a dog. I mean, it's a pretty busy place. And you know, a lot of guys would tell you it's not, you know, materialistically, it's not much of a house. But boy, I'll put it up against anybody's in this room as a home. Because everybody feels loved there. Everybody feels safe there. When they come to I come home from dinner, for dinner on a Monday night, my girl's got one of my guys sitting at the table. I'm like, what are you doing here? Oh, it's chicken cutlets. Didn't you know? You know, and I'm like, honey, don't feed them. They come back, you know. And it's just, so that's where I find my little niche around the home group and stuff. And even when I travel to some of these things, being a step parent, I think, is the toughest adult role God assigns us. And I don't want to say this in a bad way, but you're there for all the problems. You're there for all the financial, regardless of how the biological dad is or when he's in the picture. That can vary. So you get all the worries. You get the discipline. You get all that stuff. And this has happened to me. But when Junior hits that first home run, he's going to run over to his dad, although you threw baseballs with him for 2 years. You got to be okay with that. And when you do get okay with that, it is the greatest thing in the world. Because that first time that boy's going to call you dad, if you're a guy like me, or when they go out of their way to write beautiful stuff in your cards, or when they show up at your AA anniversary, I got these drunken Irish clan, takes up a whole section in my home group when we celebrate. It's just the best thing in the world. You just got to get out of the way of that stuff. And I know Steve was talking about pride earlier. Oh man, you just, you know, but when we set that aside and we look at, and we practice some of these traditions in our home. The unity in my home is number one. I'm not number one. But I've come to a place where they all come to me for advice. They all tell me that I'm easy to talk to, that I don't overreact. My daughter just had that conversation with me not too long ago. And this is a girl that didn't talk to me for 3 years when I first started dating her mother. And then she was about 12 to 15, and she was just a nasty little girl. And my sponsor used to tell me to tell her, Cal, I'm sorry you're having a bad day, but you can't talk to me like that, so I'm not going to stay in this conversation. And I would just walk out on the deck and pray. And Callie was saying, you've always been a rock in this house, and I just wanted to tell you I appreciate it. And I said, Callie, don't think that I didn't pray up a storm trying to raise you kids the best we could. And she says, oh, when you went out on the deck? I said, it was either that or throat punch you, honey, you know. And she said, I know, but we were never able to push you over the edge, and we're just grateful that you're our dad. Does that make all the stuff better? You know, I don't know, but the fact that we're having the little successes that God's been giving us, it seems to be very helpful to a lot of men who, especially nowadays, are going and dating and marrying women with children and things like that. It's not easy, but it's well worth it. You know, so I think that's what I got on that. Thanks.
Steve Lamb, alcoholic. My dark past. This sucks. Just want to put that out there. When I graduated from college, I went through infantry training, and then I went through airborne school, and I went through Ranger school. I spent a year over in Korea, and then I went through selection and assessment, and I served as a Green Beret for a while. And I was in Beirut in 1983 from April through October of 1983. I left 3 days before the Marine BLT blew up. I was there when the embassy blew up, and I still feel uncomfortable when I hear people say to me, thank you for your service. And I understand what they're saying, but there was no real service involved in relation to what we would call service as we understand it, certainly in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was in a position where I was a team leader, I was a detachment commander, and I had authority over a lot of things, and there was a lot of death and destruction during that time period. I was in an active combat zone, and a good deal of that death and destruction was caused by me and was not necessary. And we talk about we will not wish to regret the past. Well, I regret the past. I did some really bad stuff. And, I've made amends as best I could. I made amends to Mother Teresa's orphanage out of Beirut. And I've done a lot of other stuff, and I thought, man, I'll never be able to repair that damage. I'll never be able to undo that, and I won't be able to undo it. But I can use it. And I've been stunned by the number of men that have come to me because they've had situations where they need to talk to me. And I happen to be a lawyer, so they can tell me stuff that I cannot disclose. And I will tell you, sometimes I don't want to hear that stuff. But they need to say it, and I need to hear it. And I can tell you that we can be healed through that. And I don't, the whole we will not regret, I just don't see it that way. I regret it. I did some really awful stuff. But I did it. It's who I am. And, you people could say, well, you were drinking, you were doing a lot. No, I just did it because I could do it. When you were in special forces, it meant special privileges, and I just did it because I could do it. We used to talk about, if you didn't get caught, it didn't happen. Well, it happened. I know it happened. I was there. And these are the things that we don't want to talk about. These are the things that go bump in the night. These are the things that we bump out again to. And it's like, when I first came back from Beirut, my wife had to wake me up with a stick because it wasn't safe. And I've had occasions where Tommy has talked about where I turn around and I act a particular way, and people remember that. And it scares the hell out of them. And I don't want to be that man, and I don't believe that I am that man, but I still have that capability, and there's just an undercurrent in me that I don't think will ever, ever go away. But I do believe that as long as I keep trying to do this, it will stay below the surface. You know, and I can't tell you the number of people that I have listened to inventory from that have gotten that relief. You know, and it's interesting because a lot of times we talk about making a direct amends. A lot of these, you can't, we don't even know who they are, you know? But we do the best we can, you know? And when we start to really get relief, it's interesting to see when the next guy comes to us and we try to help him, then we get some relief. It's a very strange, bizarre thing that makes no sense. But it works. Thanks.
I had to go look at a job, and my son was with me, and one of the superintendents that works for me was with me about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I don't remember exactly when it was. And we were in a city office building, and we were trying to get into the IT department. And you got special badges and everything else, and it was after hours, and and we had to get in there because there was some stuff going on with the building that we needed to get into, and my son's trying to figure out what we're going to do. Maybe we should call the cops. And I picked the lock on the door and opened the door. And he looked at me, he said, "You're an idiot." It's our dark past, right? It takes so many different forms. I can tell you today that I sat with a man and he told me some stuff that he's never told anybody else. How does that happen for a guy like me? You know, and it's funny because it used to be, I think you don't know my whole story, but after I'd spent 13 years in Alcoholics Anonymous and got drunk again. That can be helpful. And when it happened to me, I didn't think it would ever be helpful. It was just all about me. And what I used to say this all the time. When I came back in, I used to get pissed off at guys that went back out. What are you, an idiot? Have you ever thought that about somebody that brought something to you in Alcoholics Anonymous, or you found out? You're an idiot. What the book actually tells me is that in God's hands, not Jack's hands, our dark past can become our greatest asset. There's a transformation for me that has to happen for it to be effective. And that's the steps. You know, I come in here and take the steps and I'm transformed into somebody that's useful and kind and loving. And, you know, this is what it looks like. I have the same name as my father. I'm John Henry Wheeler IV. And when I was doing all the shit I'm about to tell you about, I swore I'd never name my son John Henry Wheeler V. But my son's name is John Henry Wheeler V. And but I sold his truck. I sold my dad's truck because I could sign the title. The title was signed. The title was in John Wheeler's name. I had ID and everything. And my dad and I had a really tough relationship. I mean, I stole everything that could be stolen from him. I was the guy, you know, he would tell me things like, "Come home." I couldn't come home. And the tools he had to deal with that was, he raised me with an iron fist. He's an old cowboy contractor. His father was a steel worker in New York City. And it didn't go well for us for a really long time. And I got to make amends to him. And I want to share two stories about him, you know, because we're all hooked on our dads, you know. We just, you know, we want to love them. We want to get rid of all that shit. And I can tell you that the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous is a good start. I'm working, my dad and I patched things up, and I'll tell you two stories about him, you'll understand where we are. He worked for me for a long time. And I'm sitting on it. We're building a house in Aspen, and it's a big house. And he's down on the ground floor in the entryway, and he loves Alcoholics Anonymous today. He's good friends with a lot of the guys that I'm good friends with. He knows a lot of them, and a lot of guys in the program work for the company. They have their own companies. They're also employees of the company. And so there's a lot of joking around, and there'll be guys that go to the noon meeting and take off because we got a new guy that needs to go. So 3 guys will take him to a meeting, and my dad sees all this over as he's working for me. And I'm up on the 3rd floor of this house with a stair tower that goes down to the entryway, and my dad's in the entryway, and it's early in the morning, and I had hired a new carpenter, and the carpenter shows up in the house, and my dad sees him first thing in the morning, and he says to the guy, "Are you in Alcoholics Anonymous too?" and I'm listening from the 3rd floor, and the guy says, "No, I'm not an alcoholic, but my wife thinks I might be." And I'm listening. My dad says to him, "You should talk to my son." That's full circle. And I don't remember what I was doing, but it was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And I was doing something. I was in a meeting somewhere, and I'm getting texts on my phone, and I can hear the thing blowing up. And I look at the phone, and it says, it's my sister in California. And it says, "Call me now." And I call my sister. And she says to me, "Your dad's fallen, and he's broken his leg, and it's bad, and he won't let the surgeon touch him until you talk to the surgeon." So she puts me on the phone with the surgeon, and I talk to the surgeon about what's going on and everything else. And then the surgeon handed the phone to my dad. And my dad said to me, "What should I do?" And I said, "You need to do exactly what the surgeon's telling you." And you don't have a lot of time to think about it. But I can go from the guy that I can't have a relationship with him to where he's 84 years old and broke his leg in California, and he won't let a doctor touch him until I talk to the doctor. You can't make that shit up. That I'm going to go from the place I was in to this place. It doesn't add up. The math here is skewed, I'm telling you. And if you're new here and you think 2 + 2 = 4, it doesn't. We try to battle this thing with logic and reason, and you can't battle this with logic and reason. The only thing that works is a spiritual experience. And if we take those steps and have that transformation, things that could not be done get done. And not because of Jack, in spite of Jack. Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. I used to lie a little bit. One of the lies I told for many, many years was that I graduated from college. I told future and current employers that. This is before technology was such that they could instantaneously check you out. It took longer. But see, I went to college for 4 years, and I found the fraternity that had 25 kegs on the weekend in my first weekend on campus, and all of my plans changed. I was going to go play basketball, be a good student, and I sat down with my advisor, who I was introduced to probably in my second semester senior year. So if that tells you something about my academic record, and we're looking at not my transcript, but my transcript, and for my pre-graduation plan. And he said, "Mr. O'Neill, we have a problem." And I said, "Oh, we do? What is that?" He said, by my calculations, in May of 1987, this coming May, you'll be 21 credit hours short for graduation. That's 7 classes. And I said, okay. And he said, do you know what we call someone who is 21 hours short? And I said, no. And he said, a junior. You're not graduating. Well, I'd already invited the family to come because this is going to be a big deal, right? That I was going to at least walk on stage, and I thought I'd maybe receive a blank piece of paper, and they don't even do that if you're that, they don't do that for juniors. So I made up a story and hey, I got a couple of classes to finish over the summer, so don't come. My grandmother sent me $500, congratulations, which I cashed at the Townhouse, which was the local bar. And when graduation day happened, I sat and I watched my graduating class go by in caps and gowns while I was in T-shirt, flip-flops, and I had a beer in my hand. And my resentment grew and festered, and it continued for years and years. That was 87, so that's 13. 23 years later, 6 years sober, I woke up in the middle of the night shaking. And whenever the name of the school, Marietta College, kind of would hit me, if a piece of mail or anything happened, anybody had mentioned the school, I would get almost visibly uncomfortable because it was a lie. I told everybody. I told my wife that I graduated from college. I don't know that she believed me, but anyway, I knew there was only one thing to do, and I picked up the phone the next day and I called the registrar. And I said, you don't know me, or wouldn't remember me, but I used to be a student at Marietta, and I'd like to see what I can do to graduate. And they said, oh, we remember you. You owe us money. We've been looking for you. I'm like, here I am. So apparently I left with a $4,000 or $5,000 bill, which with interest and penalties and everything else assessed was about $30,000. And they said, you can't re-register until you pay your bill. And I said, listen, I don't know if $5,000 or $30,000 is the right number, but whatever you tell me, I'll pay. But I have some unfinished business. And they said, we'll get back to you. And they said, how's $10,000? And I said, done. I sent them the money, and I enrolled like the following day. And while raising a family, kind of starting a fledgling company, running for Senate actually at the time, I completed 7 classes with a 3.9 GPA on those 7 classes, which brought my cumulative GPA to a 2.012. Good enough to graduate. See, my blood alcohol content and my GPA were usually in parity, 1.8. So in any case, on Mother's Day of 2012, 25 years to the day when I was supposed to graduate, I flew my mother, my wife, and our 4 children to this small town in Ohio where a 47-year-old guy put on a cap and gown and marched with a bunch of students who had been together for 4 years, and they're like, who is this guy? I told them I was a super senior, but in any case, and I started to build a relationship with the school that day. I've been blessed with some success, and none of my own doing. I mean, yes, but no. I mean, I kind of get out of the way most of the time, and I made a contribution to the school on that day, the kind of graduated seniors challenge, and kind of put my name on the radar a little bit. They developed a relationship. Well, fast forward a couple of years, I was asked to be a trustee of a school where most of my 4 years I had a 1.8 GPA. And for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been a trustee of this institution, which I resented for 25 years. I I lied about being a student. The funny thing is that they all know my story. All the trustees know, in fact, they joke, you go and you get a badge, right? John Smith, class of 65. It's on your badge, 65. They give me 2 dates, 87 and 2012. And at one meeting, the provost, which the academic dean, actually printed out a copy of my transcript and had it on the board for everybody to see in its glory. But I hesitate to say this, but I'm going to say it, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm a big shot, because I don't believe I am. I'm the chairman of the advancement committee for the school, and in the last few years raised $100 million to build new buildings and endow programs, and my family and I were blessed and privileged to be able to step up to the plate and contribute $2 million to a school that I hated for most of my adult life, and I candidly pissed on for the 4 years I was there, pardon my language. And my father was a college professor, and like many of us here, we had a very challenged relationship with our father. And I knew, even though we never talked about it, I knew that I let him down. I knew that he did not approve, because he was a guy that always said I had potential. I had so much potential, and I never lived up to my potential. They wrote an article about me in the college quarterly magazine and didn't interview me. They interviewed me. They didn't tell me what it was about. They didn't tell me the article was about me. They just wanted some quotes for something, and I gave them some quotes. Most of the people that they interviewed were family members and some professors that remembered me back then. My children, 4 of them now in their 20s. I got sober when the youngest was 2 and the eldest was 7. He's now 20, will be 27, and the youngest is 22. They have pulled me aside several times and said things like, "Dad, you are the inspiration I've needed in my life to do this, to do the hard thing, to not give up, to never quit." You know, I've heard a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous say, Alcoholics Anonymous gave me my future back. They gave me a new future. That's true. But for me, what's more true is that Alcoholics Anonymous gave me my past. This program and this fellowship allows me to see the past through that new pair of glasses and see the good and see that golden thread that even existed in those darkest times and how everything was connected and interconnected and got me to where I am today and where my family is. I don't think this is how the story was supposed to happen. I was doing my damnedest to make sure it didn't happen this way. But because you captured me, and I was desperate and had no other place to go, I had no choice but to listen. And I have a life today that it's not my own, but I'm so grateful because the family that has benefited from this shift, I mean, the result has been nothing short of miraculous, and I don't know. I'm droning on now, but yeah, it's amazing how reframing the mind can be reframed, and something I had so much disdain and regret about is such a source of joy for me now, and I owe it all to you. Thank you.
Okay, we have ran out of time. I want to thank all of y'all for doing the language of the heart. All of y'all. Yeah, that's a lot.